Hello everybody and welcome back to the next episode of my Red Dead Redemption 2 playthrough. I have a confession to make. I already recorded an episode a couple of days ago. It'd been a long day at work, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to get ahead, I'm going to do an episode tonight. So I recorded for over 6 hours until it was about 1:30 in the morning. But I was proud because, you know, I'd got ahead and it just feels good to be ahead of the game and give yourself a bit of extra time. And then as I was just wrapping up and about to head back to the ranch to sign off, I thought, oh, I'll have a look and see how long I've been recording for. I hadn't been recording the entire 6+ hours. I was just talking to myself in my spare room. There was no recording going on at all. You cannot believe the rain. I literally just sat at my desk like this for a solid 10 minutes because I could not believe I'd just spent an entire evening talking at my computer, and I didn't even have an episode to show for it. And I did some really cool stuff as well. The reason I'd been recording for so long is because I'd been going into all the characters. It cuts down to just, like an hour or two, but I'm actually spending a long time riding around talking before I do all the editing and everything. So yeah, I spent a long time. I really got into some good character stuff. I did 2 bounty missions. I found 2 dinosaur bones. You can imagine my excitement, 2 in 1 episode. I found a rock carving. I found a giant skeleton. At the top, halfway up Mount Shaun, under this little overhang cave bit, I found this enormous skeleton, and I was so excited. And yeah, I just couldn't believe it. And you know, I was showing my first-hand reaction, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest. And yeah, that was actually right before I realised I wasn't recording. So I'm sorry you've missed some stuff. I will go over and talk about all the characters again because I definitely want to share all of that with you. At least I'll hopefully have all my thoughts ready to go, because rather than figuring out as I go, I can just refer back to all the points I made before. But yeah, I'm really sorry you've missed some bounty missions, you've missed some dinosaur bones, and you missed that really cool skeleton. I can go back and show it, but obviously my first time reaction has happened, and I can't time travel back and get it back for you. So I'm very sorry. I'm very disappointed in myself, but at least we're past the story now, so it wasn't like a essential part of the story that I now can't go back and give you my first time reaction to. So at least it was just us riding around and chatting. But yeah, so I only have myself to blame. I can't be mad at anybody else. It was my fault. Let's do it again. I'll get through some of the characters. I believe today we're doing John. We're going to start with John. Uncle, Lenny, Mary-Beth, Sadie, and Javier. So we're going to go through those characters today. I believe I'd covered everything I was planning to do in New Austin, unless more bounty missions show up or something. So I'm probably going to be focusing a bit more on West Elizabeth now. Yeah, just sort of riding around and exploring that a bit more. And slowly working my way over towards the Heartlands and stuff. So, yeah. Right, okay, never mind. Never mind, we've got this, right? We've got this. It's okay. It's okay. Let's go. Let's do it again. I did loads of chores last time as well. I was talking about John while I was doing the chores. I tried to go to bed in the evening after dinner. When Abigail had gone to bed, I tried to go to bed as well, and I didn't get a cutscene, so I don't know if that's not working for me. Maybe I've missed my chance or something, but I was told that there's sometimes a cutscene and I've not had it, so I might try going to bed after dinner before Abigail goes to bed. Oh, there was a brilliant moment as well. Everyone was sat around the campfire, and I walked over and sat down and I was like, well, this song is horrendous. Like, it sounds terrible. Normally their songs and stuff are on point, but this one just sounds like ear-bleeding noise. It was horrible. And it turned out that Jack was playing a song on the harmonica, and Abigail was singing along with that song, but Uncle was playing a different song on the banjo, which is why everything just sounded like it clashed. It was only when Abigail and Jack stopped and then Uncle was carrying on but with an entirely different song that I realised what was happening. So yeah, that was really funny because I was there just like awkwardly looking at the camera like, are you guys hearing what I'm hearing? Like, is this just a very like acquired taste, or does this sound like an absolute catastrophe? So, I'm not on the ranch, I'm halfway up a mountain because I realised while I was going around Mount Shaun, I realised that... Oh, I did the legendary bison as well. Oh, I said a joke as well, you missed my joke. What did the dad buffalo say to his son on his son's first day at school when he left? Bye, son. You think I was gonna let you get away with that terrible joke? Where am I? Am I close to those? Oh, it's over here. I'm all the way over here. I think when I stopped I was over here somewhere. Okay. Okay, I'll go back to the giant skeleton. I'm sure most of you have probably seen it before, but just in case anybody watching this hasn't, I'll show you what it looked like, but yeah, the wonder and the excitement will still be there to an extent, I'm sure, but you know, it's not the shock of me seeing it for the first time. Here we go. So I actually came up from this side. Hold on. So I was running around the bottom of the mountain and then I saw this like way I could run up. So I ran up here and I saw, I went into eagle vision and this was glowing gold, and then I saw it was because of this really cool rock carving, which I've now sketched down. So yeah, it looks like a DNA thing or something. So I was like, wow, that's cool. Well, there's probably not going to be anything else up here, but I'll just keep following this path up and just see if I end up at the top or if it gets to a dead end or there could be a hidden chest or something. So I just ran up here and then literally suddenly I was right in front of these giant remains. But look at the size of it compared to me. I'm like a toddler compared to this guy or girl. But one thing I did notice, because I'm always a weirdo and I have to zoom in on dead bodies, firstly, it's got brown wavy hair, still in good form. Oh, sorry, I kept doing that by accident as well, trying to look too closely and then stepping on him. He or she has this massive hole in the side of their head, but there's no like stick or anything still here, so I don't know if that happened afterwards, like it died, and then since then someone's been really disrespectful and stabbed it in the brain, or if it died from a hole in the head, or if maybe, I mean, this clearly isn't a normal human, so maybe that was like their, you know, like you've got your the soft bit on your temples, maybe they didn't have like a fully closed hole there, and it was like really wide. It seems like a bit of a nature flaw though. That's a very vulnerable spot if it's like that big on the side of your head. There's this giant, what looks like a spiked club, which I imagine might have been its weapon of choice. Possibly a big bit of cloth over there. But then there's also like some normal human remains there. And a fire and stuff. So I don't know if somebody was camped here and that could be like theirs, or if it was this thing's, or maybe they coexisted at the same time. But yeah, nuts. Look at the size of it. His wonky jaw. And also, when I first saw this, I gave myself massive feels because it died on the side of a mountain and you can't see the view, but it's very much like what happened with Arthur, where it was like just looking out at the most beautiful view and like the mountains in the distance and the whole valley before it. But it would have been not quite facing sunrise. Sunrise is over there, so it would have seen the light spill across the valley perhaps, but not the actual sun rising. Oh, are the clouds lifting a bit? So yeah, you can kind of see the view now. There we go. Just like our boy Arthur. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So for now I will carry on exploring. I was just kind of going around the bottom of the mountain like this, and then if I saw anything cool or saw that there could be something further up, I'd run up. In the meantime, while I'm running around, of course I can talk a bit about John Marston. I barely played Red Dead 1 a long time ago, and I can remember little bits, but I didn't really get far into it. I have watched someone else's playthrough in like bits here and there, but yeah, so I don't really remember much at all. So my thoughts on John Marston are going to be based pretty much entirely on him in Red Dead Redemption 2. There's not going to be any influence really from Red Dead Redemption 1. And also I think that's quite good because there may be some people watching who have not yet played Red Dead Redemption 1, and I don't want to give any spoilers, so it works quite well. Yeah. So if you feel like I've missed something or I've not considered like how he ends up after the story, that's why. Right, so let's get into it, shall we? So we know John Marston joined the gang quite young. I think he was in his teens. I don't know, but I get the impression he's younger than Arthur. It seemed like he grew up with Arthur being like a bit of a big brother, and with Dutch being a bit like a father. What happened here? Oh my goodness! Is that a stuffed gorilla? What? Why is there a gorilla here? Why aren't you drawing it in your book? This is a pretty cool discovery. Is this from like a flood, or did it fall off the bridge? Damn it, I need answers! No, we're not going to talk about this? I wonder if this is to do with a taxidermist. Given that it's like a dead stuffed animal and all. I mean, it would make sense if it got pushed off of here. Possibly if it fell off of that bridge. Like, it looks like... I don't know, but... Let me keep running up that hill. Because there was a place where... some people fell off the hill. I don't think it had anything to do with the taxidermist though. It was just near that house. Oh, what a mystery. I didn't even know if it was around here. Apart from all of these like fallen trees and rocks and stuff, I can't see anything close by apart from these bridges. And that cliff, like that thing. So I don't know if it's fallen off this bridge and has maybe been swept down in like a flooding or a landslide or something, or if it got pushed off the edge of there. That's just to get it up there though would be pretty tricky. But there's like a gorilla in a box, which is a bit unusual, and no explanation. No other bodies. Just some broken boxes and a gorilla. Still standing upright, still in good form. And given the like platform and stuff he's on, pretty sure he was like a display piece, like he's been stuffed for display or a museum or something. What a mystery. Okay, maybe we'll find out later on. Maybe some of you guys know. Maybe it is forever a mystery. Was not expecting that, I must say. This game will never cease to surprise me. Right then. I'm pretty sure I've run along here before, like a few times. It makes you wonder where else I've been where you guys are like, no, just look down there, just, oh, she's gone past it. Because yeah, you can see it from the road, but I never noticed before. I don't know if it's just because Arthur was the main character, and as we know a bit later on, which I'll get into in a bit, John kind of fell out of Dutch's favour. I don't know if Arthur was always the, like, favoured son. I do think his relationship with Arthur, though, was generally quite a fond one. I think, like brothers, they'd bicker and argue and give each other grief and wind each other up. But I think ultimately they really cared about each other and they had each other's backs. Yeah, I think just like many brothers or siblings out there. I don't know much about John's actual parents or why he ended up with the gang. I can't remember, but I get the feeling he didn't speak or think very highly of his father. But yeah, I don't know why or what happened or how he ended up on his own. I'm not quite sure. I think once he fell in with the gang, you know, he found his new family. I think he was very loyal. I don't know how he was with Hosea actually, but I think he was very loyal to Dutch and to Arthur. I think, you know, he found a lifestyle that fit very well with him. I don't know if he grew into it or it always kind of suited his nature. But I think as far as he was concerned, this was his life now. This was him for life. He just wanted to stay with Arthur, stay with Dutch, stay with the gang. Yeah, just like stand by them through thick and thin. As long as that they were all together, living this sort of free life outside of the confinements of the law, I think he was happy. This was his place. And then of course I don't know how, but he ended up with Abigail. I don't know if it started as just, you know, more of a physical thing, or if he was quite smitten with her to begin with. I don't know if it happened before she joined the gang or once she was already a member of the gang. But either way, we know that he ended up with Abigail. I don't think he ever expected or wanted really to be a father. I think he kind of, like I said, he just thought this was his life. He was always going to be one of Dutch's sons. He was always going to be a brother to Arthur. He was always going to be with the gang, living this life, the life he was used to, the life he was comfortable with. I don't think he ever intended to settle down or have kids or probably even get married. I think what he had with Abigail was probably at the time a second priority to him. You know, he might have genuinely loved her, but I think, you know, Dutch and the gang were always his highest priority. And at the time, she could fit into that quite nicely. You know, it wasn't a clash or anything. But then Jack came along, and I don't think he ever expected that, or possibly even really thought about it. You know, what would happen if they had a kid. And I think that kind of turned his life upside down a bit. We do know that initially he didn't think Jack was his kid. I do wonder sometimes if he genuinely thought Jack wasn't his, or if he perhaps even hoped Jack wasn't his, because like I said, that responsibility then did clash with his priorities. You know, I don't think he ever wanted or expected to be a dad, and he wasn't cut out for family life. So I don't know if because Abigail was close to, or possibly had even slept with other men, he kind of thought that Jack wasn't his, or if he had actually kind of
Come on, girl. One more
hoped
time.
because then it would save him from that responsibility. But when we started the game, he was very distant with Jack. You know, he was just very absent from Jack's life and didn't really want anything to do with him. And he seemed very bitter towards Abigail as well, which I don't think had always been the case, but perhaps because of his resentment towards You know, Jack being born and Abigail telling him to take responsibility for that and nagging him to, you know, be a father to Jack. I think perhaps that just kind of made him want to just push them away and have nothing to do with them. Yeah, I think he came to like resent Abigail for it, resent Jack for being born. I think he just wanted nothing to do with any of it. And that was where we stepped in. John was constantly avoiding them. He was always complaining about Abigail, about how she was nagging him, about how she was really annoying and wouldn't leave him alone. He'd always try and like steer clear of them or duck out the way if he thought Abigail was out looking for him. I think he just wanted to live his life the way he always had, and didn't like this new way of life that he felt that Abigail was trying to like push onto him, but he didn't sign up for and he didn't want. And here's a really interesting thing. John disappeared for 2 years, but I don't think we ever found out why, what he did during that time. I know it was talked about. I don't even think Arthur knows what he did in those 2 years. So yeah, it was kind of spoken about, but I don't know if they say in Red Dead Redemption 1 perhaps, if he talks about it. Yeah, I assume it was possibly from like the pressure of his sudden fatherhood. Maybe it all just became a bit too much and, you know, he just noped out and took a bit of a 2-year hiatus from the gang. But that does surprise me because it wasn't just Abigail and Jack that he left, it was the whole gang, and obviously he'd always been so loyal and committed to Arthur and Dutch and, you know, standing by them. So for him to actually leave them for 2 years as well, that's pretty big. So yeah, that seemed to be pretty much John's life for the first chunk of the story. Just basically wanting to just live the life he always had. Until Jack got taken. And then it triggered something very protective and very paternal in him. You know, there was no more doubting that Jack was his. There was no more, you know, trying to run away from being Jack's dad. You know, you could tell in that moment that was when he accepted that Jack was his son. So if deep down he genuinely thought that Jack wasn't his son, I don't know if we would have seen that change in John. So that's partly why I wonder if it was less that he genuinely thought Jack wasn't his, and more perhaps he was telling himself that because it would have been like an easier way to get out of living this life that he didn't want. But yeah, I think when Jack was taken, that was when he realised, you know, how much he did care for Jack and how important Jack was to him, and he did accept that he was Jack's dad and nobody messes with his son. Because yeah, it's like a switch just been turned on. Suddenly he was determined, he was hell-bent on getting Jack back. And that was when we saw John change. Up to that point, I'd felt very indifferent about John. I didn't not like him, but I didn't really like him. I just felt very neutral towards him. He just, you know, he seemed kind of cool, but also he just seemed like grumpy and yeah, had a lot of attitude all the time, so I was a bit like, yeah. Again, remember, I've not played Red Dead Redemption 1, so I don't have the attachment to him that a lot of people do from having played that game. So yeah, after that sort of paternal instinct was triggered in him, you know, he seemed genuinely very stressed and concerned about Jack's well-being. Obviously Abigail was absolutely beside herself, and John was a bit more kind of quietly steaming about it, I think. But you can tell he was really worried and determined to get him back. Of course Arthur was determined as well and helped him. After they got Jack back with the gang and he was safe again, we noticed a huge shift in John's attitude towards Jack and Abigail. Ever since that moment where he changed after Jack was taken, he suddenly, I wouldn't say it came totally naturally to him, but he definitely was, you know, family with them. I think there's that whole, like, you know, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Oh, is that the Francis guy? Can I go and see him? Oh, I thought the door was open. That light is being really weird on the house. I can go in. Oh, this is so cool. What is this? That's the one I just found. He has a picture of it. But he doesn't know. He's asking me to find the rock carvings. But that looks like DNA. And then that thing that I thought looked like a mushroom, it looks like a rocket above some houses, and there's smoke. Has he drawn the rock carvings before? Oh yeah, there it is in the corner as well. What? Oh! That's him! It's got the birthmark on his face. That's his stages of life. There's a baby, an old man, and a skull. So that's like him in his life. Him stepping through a portal. I think there's a bear outside. Wait. Is that a nuclear bomb? Actually, on rockets and stuff. They didn't have rockets back here. I suppose someone mentioned in the comments about him being a time traveller. I think they might just be right. A rocket? Saturn? Did they know about Saturn? I have like a cool glass globe here. I'm a bit of a space nerd. I've got a cool glass globe here of Saturn. Isn't that cool? With like the some of Saturn's moons. Yeah, I don't know if they knew about it then. I mean, Mary-Beth was talking about like, what do you think there's like people on the moon and stuff? So that was like 7 years before this time, but where did the rock carvings come from though? Surely he didn't do them himself, otherwise he'd know where they are. But if there's already like rockets and stuff, what if all these images are on rock carvings within the game? But if he didn't do them, who did? Is it only him who can time travel? Or is he trying to figure out who else has time travelled and done rock carvings? This is fascinating! Yeah, because someone in the comments was saying the like terminology he was using was from like a couple of decades later and like didn't exist in this time. It was like slang from, I can't remember when, like the 1920s or 30s or something. He's a time traveller. I reckon so. Oh, I can't find anything. Just this crazy wall. I knew he was cool. He's a freaking time traveller. Someone said as well in the comments, like, if you play Red Dead Redemption 1, remember that birthmark. And I don't know what era he's from, but I wonder if you meet him as like a kid with a birthmark, like that's the only way you can kind of identify him, or if... I don't know. Can't wait to find out more. I might well do all of the rock carvings. Even if I have to use a guide, I want to get all the rock carvings and find out more about him. I've been told if I do, there's a cool cutscene with him, so I know I should get more of an interaction with him if I can do all of them. So, that's the plan. So, as I was saying before that really, really cool interruption, after they got Jack back with the gang, that was when John's attitude towards Abigail and Jack completely changed. And you know that saying, like, you don't know what you've got till it's gone? I think it gave John the perspective of how much they do actually mean to him. And rather than trying to fight this lifestyle that, you know, fate had kind of led him to, he instead accepted it and embraced it, and then he became really close with Abigail and Jack. You know, Abigail was nagging him less because he was present again in her and Jack's life, making an effort to sort of spend time with them and help raise their son. It was really, really sweet and wholesome. But I think, like I said before when I was talking about Abigail, I think Abigail's priorities shifted once she had Jack. I think there was a time when she was quite happy living her life sort of free of responsibility and, you know,
easy.
Being a part of this gang. But I think when Jack came along, you know, she kind of took to her responsibility over Jack, and she wanted him to have a safe and nurturing upbringing, not a life on the run with a bunch of outlaws. She wanted to do it with John, so I think she'd stayed because this is where John was. But now she had John back in their lives. I think she wanted them to sort of, like we've seen in the epilogue, she wanted them to sort of have a normal, safe, secure lifestyle. Not one where, you know, John might go out and get shot and never come back. Not one where the Pinkertons would be riding in any minute, shooting them all up. She wanted her and Jack and John to leave, probably, and settle down somewhere, and then have a normal family life. I don't know how approving John was of this. Obviously he'd always loved and been loyal to Arthur and Dutch, but also he was now loving and loyal towards Abigail and Jack, and it was almost like he had to choose a family. You know, was he going to choose his old family or his new family? Both were very important to John. I think he kind of wanted to stay, but obviously he wanted to make Abigail happy and have this life with Abigail and Jack. So yeah, I don't know how swayed he was at this point. Dutch did not like that at all. Dutch obviously likes people being loyal to him. He likes having that prestige and power and control, and he gets that from people sticking with him and being loyal to him and letting him lead them and following his orders. He likes that power and control over people. He likes that attention. He likes that security. And I don't think he liked at all that, in his eyes, Abigail was trying to take John away from him. Obviously, Abigail wasn't doing it because she had anything against Dutch. She was doing it because she cared for Jack and her family now, and, you know, that was her priority. Dutch got very bitter, paranoid about it. I think in his eyes, Abigail was like this toxic woman who was trying to poison John's mind and manipulate him and turn him against Dutch, and she was trying to steal John away and you know, take away his son, sort of thing, or like one of his, and take away his son and one of his most loyal people. I don't think he would have cared if it was Abigail trying to like take Swanson or Micah or somebody away. Oh gosh, can you imagine? what a pairing. But I think he cared when it was, like I said before, like his inner circle people. John, Arthur, Hosea, like the people who'd always stood by him and been with him before the gang grew and like got some new members that he kind of cared less about. I think he didn't want anybody to take away the people who he thought would stick with him to like the very end, who'd always be there for him. I think like nobody touched those people or took away those people from him. You know, he saw it almost like a personal attack on himself, which is a bit of a self-absorbed view to have. You know, anyone could see that, you know, John's responsibilities might change now he had a son, and, you know, the love of his life, but I don't think Dutch saw it that way. I think Dutch saw it as like, you know, he should be loyal to Dutch forever. Dutch should always come first. If he wanted to like mess around with someone and, you know, like have a kind of fling, then that was fine, but he always stayed loyal to Dutch. But of course it was more than that for John. You know, he was very serious about Abigail, very serious about Jack. My camera might suddenly look a bit different. It's because I had to take a break. I had an appointment and wanted to get some food and stuff, so the sun has now set and we're into artificial lighting, so in case you noticed I looked different suddenly, it's the same day, just a little bit later. So I don't know if Dutch disliked Abigail initially, or if he just viewed her as a threat when her and John started to get closer. I can't really remember how he was with her before they rescued Jack and stuff. So then Dutch just kind of discarded John. You know, this is pretty harsh and quite fast actually, considering John presumably had been like a son to him for the last 15, 20, however many years. You know, it didn't take him long to suddenly turn cold towards John, and suddenly he was kind of bad-mouthing John to Arthur. John just entirely fell out of favour with Dutch. Dutch didn't trust John anymore. Dutch was slandering John. He was paranoid about John. It just all went really nasty. Arthur, thankfully, isn't so gullible as to just believe whatever he's told, and as far as he was concerned, John was still sound, so yeah, I think he just kind of tried to stay neutral between the two and not take sides. I suppose he might have thought that, like, hoped that it would all sort of blow over, and you know, like families do, sometimes they'll kind of rub each other the wrong way and fall out, but then they'll make up or it will blow over. But I think when things really started to turn sour was during the bank robbery mission. I mean, Dutch was already like pretty against John by that point, but John got captured, obviously. He was captured, imprisoned, and then there was talk of him getting hung. Now, I mean, Micah, who was like 2 months into the gang, he got captured and put in prison, and there was talk of him getting hung, and Arthur didn't want to go after him, but Dutch insisted. He insists. So he clearly had this kind of like, none of our people get left behind, you know, if any of our people get captured, we'll save them sort of approach. You know, Micah didn't even mean that much to him by then. Certainly not more than somebody he'd raised like a son. But when John was imprisoned and there was talk of hanging him, suddenly he was like, oh, they probably won't actually hang him. Oh, that's not important right now. He's not our priority, you know. Comparing the two situations like for like, Micah's situation and John's, yeah, it just goes to show just how much Dutch had changed by that point, or at least how his attitude was towards John. My suspicion by that point is Dutch clearly saw John as a threat, or as somebody who had turned his back on him. And I feel like Dutch thought that, oh no, if the law catches him and hangs him, then John will no longer be a problem. It was kind of like a... It may not have been anything that Dutch planned or foresaw, but it kind of, I think as far as Dutch was concerned, worked in Dutch's favour. You know, if he didn't have John against him and turning Arthur and the others against him, then, you know, more power to Dutch. So I think to him it was kind of like a secret benefit, and he was kind of playing the whole, oh no, we will go and get him at some point, hoping that if he bided his time, John would hang, John would no longer be a problem, and he'd have the gang back under his control. I think that was possibly what was going through his mind. Again, this did happen after Dutch hit his head, so I don't know if this was the Dutch before, and in this kind of situation, in this kind of situation, before, Dutch would have done the same thing, and he'd just been so good to John and Arthur up to this point because everyone was getting along, or whether maybe Dutch was a bit narcissistic in general, and even before, if anyone had betrayed him, he would have shown this kind of ugly side to himself. We saw a very similar thing with Abigail. When Abigail was taken, I'm trying to remember the details, the Pinkertons showed up, and Tilly and Jack made it. They went and rode and found the others. But unfortunately Abigail was captured, and Arthur was like, we've got to go and get her. Micah was like, no, you know, sacrifices, and you know, she's not worth it, we're so close, we need to keep riding on this one. And Dutch sided with Micah. That was, yeah, that moment where Dutch really just put a nail in the coffin.
Whoa now.
And then of course we saw it in the final train mission that ended up being a bit of a setup. So they went to check on him. They probably either assumed he was dead or left him for dead, hoping that the Pinkertons would take care of him, and then came back and played the role of, oh, we tried, but yeah, no, it was too late, he's already gone, until of course John managed to get himself back to camp. And again, I think that was trying to get other people to take care of his problem for him. It was all about John and Abigail, and as far as Dutch was concerned, they were like the toxic ones, who were turning everyone against him. They were the betrayers. So any opportunity, I think he saw to get rid of them without it looking like it was him getting rid of them. Yeah, I think he kind of took that opportunity. I think, like I said before, John was loyal to Abigail and Jack, but he was still loyal to Dutch and Arthur. I think he just kind of hoped he could be loyal to all of them and they could all sort of stay and get along. But I think because Dutch had this attitude of it's me or them, or didn't like the idea of John's loyalty being split in half between him and his family, and because he became so malicious towards them, I think that's what pushed John away. I think John became very disenchanted with Dutch, and stopped being loyal to him because Dutch had already kind of forsaken him. Dutch's paranoia and blame for John kind of became a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't think John was a problem for him at all until Dutch made him a problem. But yeah, Dutch kind of brought it on himself by how he treated John and Abigail. I think they all could have worked really well together and carried on quite harmoniously. I think Abigail would have wanted to settle down with John, but I think if Dutch had played his cards a bit differently, I think John would have stayed loyal to him until they were kind of in a better place. Oh, this is that cave. Am I there? Oh yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go pop in and see our devil friend again. See if he says anything different. Hello?
I really don't want company.
Philosopher.
This cave isn't for the likes of you. You'll not be happy here. Listen, if I wanted to make friends, I wouldn't live in a cave. If I wanted a friend, I wouldn't choose you. I don't know you, I don't like you, I don't want you. I don't want friends, I don't want company, and I particularly don't want you, whoever you are. If I come out of the shadows, you'll be very, very, very frightened. I see you, man. You're just a man. I'm an immortal spirit. I am, and that's a fact. I am the spirit of living in a cave and laughing at idiots like you. I'm above humanity, miles above it. I prove that by living in a cave. I'm above your feeble morality. I don't like you. I don't need you. I don't. I'm not lonely. I've never been lonely. I've got my thoughts and my memories. They're special. 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 Special! You'll not get them. You won't. Leave me alone. Just go away.
Hey, fella.
What are you doing back here?
So it goes to the right
Goodbye.
and sits down. And let's see if he's here this time. He's there. Hey. He's eerily still. I guess maybe because I'm not really supposed to be up here. Yeah, I guess because I'm not really supposed to be here. They've not, like, bothered to make him seem alive and active. I kind of want to know what happens if I shoot him, but also probably shouldn't. Maybe at the very, very, very end of the game, just to see if he responds, but yeah, not right now. Okay, see you later. Woo. Hello everybody, it's me on the big screen. I just recorded an hour and 20 minutes without realising that the game capture had frozen when I was in the Devil's Cave. So yeah, I think after everything Dutch had done to John and Abigail, or how he'd treated them, I think John was definitely no longer loyal to Dutch. So I really, really don't want to have to go into all of the characters a third time, because obviously I did it all before and then it wasn't recording. I've just done it all now, so I was a bit stuck for what to do because I didn't want to do it all over again, but also yeah, I don't want you just looking at a still image the whole time. That's going to be really boring. So I thought maybe I could just record sort of me roaming around ad hoc doing other things, but at least then it's still something to focus on. However, I don't really have time to do another, add another hour and a half onto what I've already done without making this episode late. So my friend has very, very kindly offered to do it for me. So I'm going to show my friend's footage, but please do note that this isn't actually what happened in the game. I don't know how it will come out in the editing. There may be times where I'm talking about something that's not there. I'll try and use subtitles to describe what was happening, going by memory, but I'm really sorry. I know it's a bit disjointed. I think the universe just really didn't want this episode to go ahead, but I'll endeavour. I know some of you are really enjoying hearing me go into the characters, so I don't want to just skip a bunch of characters. I want to make sure everybody has their time in the spotlight to be talked about. Yeah, I think this is the best I can do. So, sorry, but thank you to my friend for doing this footage for me. And then I'll let you know when I'm back to me actually playing. I'll probably put like a subtitle to say like not my actual footage or something. Can't believe the amount of technical difficulties this one episode has had. So back to the game. Sorry to interrupt the video, but hello from the big screen. I'll go back to my little screen now. But John knew that Arthur thought for himself and wasn't so blind as to just believe whatever Dutch said. I think at the very end, obviously John and Arthur fought off a lot of the Pinkertons together. They stood up against Bill and Javier and Dutch. Like when sides really needed to be chosen, John obviously sided with Arthur, the one who'd remained by his side, who'd believed in him, yeah, who'd like stood by him through thick and thin. Even when Dutch was kind of spouting all this nonsense about him. I think at the very end he knew that he should leave Arthur. He knew that Arthur was on his last legs. Like Arthur was dying. Even if he stayed, even if he managed to kill Micah or Dutch, you know, he knew Arthur was dead. He couldn't save him from tuberculosis. I think he knew it was already a lost battle where Arthur was concerned. And he knew that he needed to be there for Abigail and Jack, that they were waiting for him, that they needed him. But even then you could see how much he struggled with tearing himself away from Arthur. Arthur was like pushing him away. It made no sense to stay, and it made every bit of sense to go to Abigail and Jack, but you can see even then he was so loyal to Arthur. And yeah, he just struggled to leave Arthur by himself, because Arthur had always stood by him and looked after him, and they were brothers and they'd always been together. I think it felt so wrong for John to have to leave Arthur when he was facing so much danger. And also, yeah, Arthur was going to die, but I think John didn't want him to die alone. But apart from sort of that sentimental reason, it didn't make sense for John to stay, and Arthur wasn't going to let John stay. And he was very loyal to Arthur, but he was also very loyal to Abigail and Jack, and he knew that they needed him. So he did begrudgingly tear himself away, knowing it would be the last time he ever saw Arthur. That was undeniably one of my favourite moments in this entire game, was when Arthur and John had their final moment together. It was heartbreaking, but just a really solemnly beautiful moment. In particular, the bit that really got me was when Arthur put his hat on John. It was like passing the mantle, you know, passing the baton. And yeah, handing over his legacy to John. That was just such a moment. Like, it was so simple, but there was just so much power in that moment. I think John is very
slow now.
Discreet with his feelings. I think he's a very kind and selfless and loyal guy. But I think whereas like Arthur was quite outward with his feelings, John's very outward with like his frustration and doubt and, you know, like negative emotions. He's quite happy to put them on display, but he's much more subtle with like love and kindness and generosity and loyalty and stuff. John kind of puts on this really tough exterior. Yeah, like he's a very cold, thuggish kind of brute. But if you look closely, it's more with his actions, I'd say. He kind of shows it more with his actions and less with his words. John is equally, I would say, equally as kind and selfless and generous. but I'd say it's more localized. He does show kindness to strangers and stuff, but again, I don't know if that's just because of how I'm playing him. But I think it's more his family that he does it for. If you look at the life John wanted to have and the life John is now living, I mean, sure, I could still kill people and stuff, but ultimately, you know, he was working at a general store. He was working as like a ranch farmhand. He didn't want that at all. That's not what he was good at. That's not what came naturally to him. That's not what he wanted. It's what Abigail wanted. What she said would be best for Jack. And he was trying his absolute best to live that way for them, and probably intended to for the rest of his life if that was what was needed. He'd literally changed his entire life to make Jack and Abigail happy. And if that's not selfless, what is? So yeah, John sacrifices a lot for the people he's loyal to. I think that's the difference between Arthur's kind of outwardly kind to whoever. For John, I think it's the people he's loyal to that he does it for, rather than just anybody. But for the people he's loyal to, he would do anything. He puts himself second every time to do right by them. And I think, although I still stand by that fatherhood and married life, and, you know, settling down and doing normal, honest work does not come naturally to him, I think he gives it his absolute best. He still tries his absolute best, even though it's outside of his comfort zone, and that's why he's kind of a bit awkward about it. He doesn't quite know how to be with Jack, but he does want to have a bond with Jack. He can be really lovely to like Rachel and stuff, but he's still a bit off with Abigail sometimes as well. I think he's just a bit socially awkward when he feels like there's that pressure there. Because he was fine with Arthur, with Dutch and stuff, you know, it just comes naturally to him, he'll speak his mind, he's, you know, his words flow fine, but the moment it's like he needs to be a dad or a husband, he's like, how do I do this? But yeah, I think he has all the best intent to give it his best shot and try. I think he's just, it's not what he ever intended, and yeah, it doesn't come naturally to him, but he still wants it, I think. I don't know if he loved Abigail before Jack came along, or if he fell in love with her afterwards. You know, I wasn't here for that, so I'm not sure, but I definitely think now he really loves her. He'll do anything for her. Maybe with a bit of sass, but he'll do it. I think he does love Jack. Again, he's just, you know, it's still out of his comfort zone, so he's still not quite sure how to be a dad to him. So yeah, I think he does love them, but he kind of shows it in his own way. I think Abigail knows John very well, and I think she can see that he really loves her and Jack. But yeah, those are my thoughts on John, based on Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm sure there is so much more about John from Red Dead Redemption 1, but just based on this game, those are my thoughts. Again, could be wrong. Feel free to let me know what you think of John, or his thoughts, or his motives, or his priorities. So the next one is Uncle. And boy, do I have a burning question about Uncle. Does anybody know his real name? I thought it like the whole game, because obviously I doubt
Easy now.
a couple had a baby boy and decided to call it Uncle. But yeah, obviously that's his nickname, but everybody calls him Uncle, even Dutch, Hosea, people who've probably known him for a really long time. Yeah, he's always just Uncle. So I wonder if anybody knows his real name. It might be he was never given one, Rockstar never chose one for him, it might be that they just never disclosed it. How funny would it be if Uncle's real name was like something really fancy? Like Bartholomew or Sebastian or something that sounds like classy. Imagine if it was called like Lawrence Ficklebane or something like something that sounds really classy. I'm not really sure how or when Uncle joined the gang. There may have been a day when he worked really hard. I don't really know what his expertise was in, but my guess would be his incentive for joining the gang wasn't because he was on the run, or I think he wanted a really free and easy and carefree life with no responsibilities. And I think he saw the gang as an opportunity to have such a life. I honestly don't know why Dutch kept him around. I'm surprised. Or maybe because Uncle was actually a really good morale boost for the gang. You know, he was very entertaining, he was very funny. He did in his own way kind of look out for people in his own way. Uncle was always the one kind of... He'd always stay around camp, but you know, he would have a lot of banter. He'd always like sit around the campfire and whip out a banjo, start a rude song. I think on one hand he did drive people nuts because he slacked so much. He somehow had a way to like slip himself out of any difficult social interaction. Whenever someone tried to give him grief for being lazy and stuff, he always managed to kind of laugh it off with a joke. Turn the situation very light-hearted and just kind of like slip out of like dodge the whole confrontation. So I don't know if he ever sort of did, maybe he did once work hard with the gang, but definitely for a long time before we met him, I think he just kind of, in his mind he was retired. I think he was just taking life at his own pace.
Easy now.
And I think the gang gave him the kind of freedom and space and opportunity to do that. Whereas if he had tried to fit in with sort of a normal life in society, you know, he wouldn't be able to have a place to sleep unless he worked. He wouldn't be able to pay bills unless he worked. If he worked, he'd have to actually work, otherwise he'd get fired. Yeah, I think he knew that there was no place for him in society if he was going to live the way that he wanted to. But he could kind of, he had a bit more sway with Dutch and the gang. He could kind of get away with living that lifestyle a bit more. And despite his, how he seemed really lazy and stupid and stuff, I think he was actually very smart, especially socially. He was very socially intelligent, very charismatic. I think he was smart enough to pretend to be lazy and stupid, and convince people that he was, so he could have an easier life. I sometimes say it about Yuki, my dog. I sometimes say that he's so smart he sometimes pretends to be stupid, because he knows then he'll get away with things more, and yeah, doesn't have to do as much. I think Uncle was that kind of person, like he was smart enough to pretend to be stupid. And that did lead me to think, when he was taken by the Skinner brothers, he was obviously very unhappy about that, but most people would be really traumatized. Ooh. You know, Uncle even then was kind of, he definitely did seem a bit beaten down. He wasn't himself, but he didn't seem as traumatized as I think most people would. And he bounced back relatively okay. I think the physical pain was more stressful to him than the sort of whole mental ordeal of being kidnapped and possibly about to die, and yeah, everything else that would have really sat with people for the rest of their lives. So I don't know if he's just, you know, mentally a very tough guy, or if he's just very good at hiding it. I wouldn't be surprised with someone with that level of like charisma and persuasion. It could be that, you know, he's actually endured quite a lot. He's just very good at kind of masking it and, you know, kind of hiding it behind jokes and humour and stuff. I don't know about that, but it's just something I thought. Or maybe he just, you know, genuinely just wasn't fussed. Maybe nothing phases him by that point. He did seem genuinely stressed in Beaver Hollow. after everything we went through in the gang. You know, he definitely didn't seem jokey and stuff then when he was talking to Arthur. He really did seem concerned and worried, so there is definitely a serious side to him underneath, but yeah, even after the ordeal with the Skinner brothers, the fact that they're still out there, still lingering near our house, he seemed pretty chill. So I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Uncle. For the most part, he was a very, kind of like some of the others I've mentioned, he was a very stable, consistent character. He obviously lost his nerve a little bit with the Beaver Hollow part in chapter 6, but you know, everybody did at that point, so he was one of the more stable characters. There wasn't too much change. I do feel like Uncle wasn't particularly loyal to anyone, I'd say. I think he was happy to stick with whoever would give him the lifestyle he wanted. I don't think he would have ridden into battle and died for all of us. I think he just wanted to live out his days with a sort of easy, carefree, drama-free life, and wherever he could have it, that's where he would be. I think he did care about the gang and about the members in it. I think he was very fond of like Arthur and John and stuff, but I don't think he was that kind of bravado, you know, I'll take a bullet for you kind of person. I think he was there if anyone wanted to talk, he was there to cheer people up. But yeah, I think his he was kind of done with the whole physical fighting if he could help it. Next we have Lenny. Lenny the Lamb, as I nicknamed him. So again, I don't know when Lenny joined, I don't know why he joined. I recall that we did read a letter, which I think was from Lenny's father. I can't remember the exact contents, but I definitely got the impression that his dad seemed quite cold and formal and strict, I think. It seemed like he did care for Lenny and he was trying to do it with the best intentions, you know, raise his son well. And yeah, and sort of teach his son like discipline and stuff to do well in his life.
Easy there.
But it definitely didn't seem like a sort of very warm relationship. It did seem very formal, very cold, very distant. I don't know if that has anything to do with why Lenny joined the gang. Perhaps,
Easy now.
I don't know, he ran away or something. Maybe he didn't want the life that his father was trying to like push him into. I know with parents like that in stories, they're often like, you know, you're going to do this job and you will do it and you will be successful and make loads of money, and it's kind of like an act of rebellion and freedom that the kids just don't want to do it. You know, they want to live their own lives, their own way, make their own choices, make their own mistakes, but they want it ultimately to be their own. I don't know if that's why Lenny joined the gang, maybe, to sort of, in an act of rebellion / freedom from his upbringing, or maybe something else. But either way, Lenny joined the gang. I think he was very young. I don't know how old. I tend to think everybody in Red Dead is older than they are, so Lenny to me looked like he was in his 20s, but I think he was probably in his late teens. If anyone knows, feel free to let me know. He seemed like a really sweet guy. Not really the kind of guy you'd expect to run with a band of outlaws, which, if his parents knew about, I bet they despised. Taking part in criminal activities, on the run from the law. So he seemed young, but he seemed like he had a lot of potential. He seemed like a really good guy, but then I guess Dutch's gang wasn't like really bad. They were outlaws and they did some pretty bad things, but they weren't like kill, rape, murder, pillage, steal from anybody. You know, they did have their own kind of moral code. And it seems like Arthur really took Lenny under his wing as well. Arthur seemed to always be like looking out for Lenny, trying to keep him safe, you know, make sure he was okay. At the end of missions with Lenny, he always told him like how well he did. I think Arthur meant it, but it was like he never told Micah or John like, oh, you did really, really well, like, well done, I'd ride with you anytime, sort of thing. But he'd always say it to Lenny, like encourage him and stuff, and it was almost like Arthur was like mentoring Lenny, I guess, because Arthur had been doing this for a long time, whereas Lenny was still very young and new to it. But Arthur could probably see that Lenny was like a good guy, but you know, he had a lot of potential, probably could be like a really, really good asset to their gang. You know, if he could keep learning and practicing and experiencing and you know, stayed alive. Yeah, he probably saw like Lenny's future with the gang being a really promising one. But yeah, it was quite sweet. Arthur kind of became almost like a big brother to Lenny. One thing that really surprised me was given how young and inexperienced Lenny was, he was very brave and very loyal. I don't know how long he'd been with the gang. I don't think it had been that long. But still, if there was ever danger, I kind of would have thought somebody that, yeah, that inexperienced and kind of new to that whole life would have been a lot more nervous, maybe a lot more keen to run away in the face of danger. But Lenny stood fast every time. He was always standing on the front line, ready to fight. Yeah, even at that point, he was always really brave, really committed, really loyal. I think as far as he was concerned, he was part of this gang and he'd live by it and he'd die by it. And if he had that much loyalty and dedication and bravery for the gang, even that early on, imagine what it would have been like 20 years in at Arthur's level. Perhaps that was what Arthur could see in him, and that's why Arthur took such shine to him, because he saw that Lenny was really something special. The thing that I find the absolute saddest about Lenny, which I've mentioned before, is the fact that every single gang member who died got a cutscene. Mrs. Grimshaw did. She was part of a cutscene when she died. Hosea did. Even Molly did, and she left the gang and then came back. Micah did. I'm pretty sure every single person got a cutscene apart from Lenny. He died just like a casual NPC. No cutscene, no gravitas, no emotional farewell or anything. Not even killed by like some great emissary or anything. He just, yeah, he was just shot by some random Pinkerton. But on the other hand, like, as much as I absolutely hate that, on the other hand, it does kind of feel a bit brutally poetic. The only difference between the gang members and the NPCs is that we've gotten to know the gang members. It felt very cold, very harsh, but at the same time, it was, in a horrible way, kind of as fair as anybody else dying without a cutscene. I think it did a really good job of portraying how quick and sudden and unexpected and unfair it felt in that moment, because... Is that grave? That's Eagle Flies' grave? I was here before. I must have been stood right by it. That's so frustrating. I knew, like, since the game was done and I've now been looking at comments and stuff, I was told that, like, Eagle Flies' was in this region and he did have a grave and everything. But I was stood, like, right here. I think I ran down that hill. I never noticed it. I almost walked past it again. It's only because I saw the rocks. Oh, was that his headband? Aww. I can't believe we just found Eagle Flies' grave. Well, I'm glad I'm at least recording today, because I would have been so gutted if I found this last time and you guys didn't get to share the moment with me. Bye, Eagle Flies. Hope you're having a nice rest. Lenny's death, not having a cutscene and being so sudden and harsh. I mean, that's probably exactly the feeling that the gang members would have felt in that moment. Like, a cutscene takes the time to, yeah, really gives time to people's death to show it and how it all plays out, and gives you time to kind of like say goodbye to that character and see them off. And the gang didn't have time when Lenny died. They had to keep moving. Even the ones who stopped just for a few seconds, and then they had to keep running. So perhaps that was why he didn't get a cutscene, because it was to give you that feeling of like, this is so unfair. Like, he wasn't given any time or any sort of space for us to say goodbye and see him, see his final moments and stuff. So perhaps that was the motive behind it. And in a way, it's very true. I don't like it at all, but it makes sense. And it was... Hello? What is it? Where are you? I feel like if it did have a cutscene, you could see more people's expressions, because obviously some people stopped, others looked as they ran past, and others just ran past and didn't even seem to acknowledge it. Because the motion capture in this game does such a good job of showing you people's facial expressions, even really subtle stuff. Like, for example, when Arthur was talking to Sister Calderon, I think her name was, and you know, he said, "I'm afraid." You saw, he said, "I'm afraid," and then you just saw his eyes just go honest. I can't even describe, like, it was, his expression was so perfectly captured, and it showed so much emotion for a video game character, in just the subtle change of his expression. So I think seeing how people looked when Lenny died would have been really interesting. Who looked really remorseful, who looked really devastated, who literally didn't seem to care at all. I'm sure that when Lenny and Hosea's bodies were recovered and they were buried, it was probably, they would probably just both buried together in the swamp for convenience, because I know the gang was still on the move, on the run, and the Pinkertons were very hot on their heels, I think. Any moment they spent anywhere near Saint Denis was risking the chance of them all getting hunted and captured or killed. So probably, you know, to honour Hosea and Lenny, they probably did go to the effort to get their bodies and give them a proper burial, you know, free, away from the civilization they'd always kind of fought to be apart from. So I know it was probably just a coincidence or out of convenience, but I thought it was actually really sweet that they were buried together. I think they both would have actually quite liked the fact that they were both buried with a friend, you know, with good company. If Lenny hadn't died, I'm quite certain, given how brave and loyal he was, I think Lenny would have sided with Arthur, and I think he would have stayed until the very, very end. Possibly even when like John and that left, I think Lenny might have stayed to fight off Dutch and Micah. John had Abigail and Jack to go back for, but Lenny didn't really have anybody like that. And I think he was just such a sweet, virtuous, loyal guy. And like I said with John earlier, I think he probably would have wanted to stand by Arthur for as long as he could, and he wouldn't have wanted Arthur to die alone. We obviously don't know, but my guess would be that Lenny would have stuck with Arthur had he survived until then. So the next on my list is Mary-Beth. Yet again, I don't know how or when she joined the gang. I don't know what her previous life was like before she was a part of the gang. She always struck me as somebody who came from quite good social status. I don't know if it was the kind of just the appearance she wanted to give off, or maybe I'm just, you know, misreading it. But she always seemed like she had quite fine clothes, quite pretty put up, ringlety hair, that really gorgeous, like, but very full-on necklace that she had. And I think Arthur even made some comments like, I can't remember exactly what he said, but like about how like life with the gang was probably not like to her tastes and stuff like that. Oh my god, Arthur was so much better at art. Like, that compared to John's abominations. Oh, Arthur, I miss you so much. Okay, everybody, we're back to my actual footage now. This was where I realised, when I was in the cave of the creepy statues, with all their little tushies. I remembered you telling me that the clue was to do with the amount of fingers. I don't know how I interact with them. Push. Okay, so we need to push them in some way. Not quite sure how. I hadn't even started figuring this out. I was going through my journal because I knew it was to do with the painting at Window Rock. So I was going to try and look at that. But yeah, then I realised I wasn't recording. So yeah, thank you very much to my friend for giving me some footage to fill that time with. And sorry to everybody. I know it would have been better to see what I was actually getting up to. But yeah, that was the best I could do with what I had. Okay, I've looked up a guide on how to do it because I couldn't figure it out. So no credit goes to me for solving this. I've cheated. But I think if I've understood the guide right... That one? Hey! God, well done to anybody figured that out by themselves. I don't know how anyone could have done. So I looked up a guide, but it says, to solve the strange statues puzzle, players must press the buttons of the statues whose fingers add up to the prime numbers, 2, 3, 5 and 7. With these 4 buttons pressed and the other buttons in the default position, a clicking noise will sound and the eagle statue in the middle will unlock, revealing 3 gold bars. But who would even think about prime numbers? How did the first person solve this? How did anybody figure this out by themselves? To be honest, I think, I mean, it would be really tricky, but the only way I can think of them doing it is running around pushing random buttons until something works. I don't think anybody would have thought to try the prime numbers. If anyone did, you're a genius. Well, we just got rich because we cheated. But I did say I might start looking at guides and stuff at this point in the game. You obviously didn't get to see... I mean, you probably got to see my reaction when I found it, but... didn't get to see it. But yeah, I ran up here. And I was like, oh, this is very tucked away. Tiny little slither of a hole. I didn't even think it was an actual cave from over here. I thought it was just like a little dark bit in the rock. Very sneaky. And I still can't figure out... I have no idea why that was showing on my map either. So, I was saying about Mary-Beth. I shall continue talking about Mary-Beth. See, I don't know what her background was, but we know that she really, really loves books and stories, and particularly romance books. She is a bit of a hopeless romantic. Is the bridge fixed? I guess it must be. Has been a while. Oh yeah.
Is that all?
They've done a pretty good job. Is the old bridge still in the river? Oh, there's a little bridge there. No? I wonder if it all washed away or if they did actually try to clear it up. Okay. I think it would fit quite well if she may have joined because at a younger age, you know, from whatever life she came from after reading the books and then seeing this opportunity to sort of, you know, live with a group of outlaws and stuff, like, potentially to her it was like the stories. You know, it was exciting, and you know, she'd make a story of her own and will be part of like an actual real story. It's a bit like I said with Molly, like potentially just at that age it was exciting, it was new, it was adventurous, especially for somebody who loved reading like books and stories and stuff. So maybe that was the appeal, and that was how she got started with the gang. You know, it was kind of like a bit romanticized and in her mind, and what I don't think she was expecting was having to do all the chores. I thought, you know, she probably thought she could ride around with like a group of like close companions, and they'd go on adventures, and then she'd spend like the quiet days reading a book under a tree, free in the middle of the woods sort of thing. But then you've got Mrs. Grimshaw coming down hard on her because she's not washed the dishes or sewn the clothes or stuff, which I don't think is kind of what she had in mind. I related to her quite a lot, to be honest. I said before, she's the character I most related to. I felt, yeah, most like. Definitely getting absorbed in a story, and then neglecting to do chores and stuff. I relate to that pretty hard. She had Mrs. Grimshaw on her case, I think because her head was a bit in the clouds and her mind was always wandering to, you know, like she was asking Tilly, like, do you think people live on the moon? Do you think they're watching us? Like, she had quite a grand imagination. I noticed in the comments there was a suggestion that Mary-Beth potentially liked Arthur at the start of the game. I don't know how much, but yeah, that she was like a little bit taken by Arthur. Who do you think was interested in Arthur? You know, like if Arthur had shown interest back or made a move or something, who do you think would have been up for that? I'm curious to know, you know, whether people agree about Mary-Beth or Karen, or maybe there's somebody else. Because I know a lot of people in camp, possibly everyone was quite fond of Arthur, but I don't know who was fond of Arthur in that way. So I would love to know your thoughts. But ultimately, a lot of you have said that she had a relationship or some kind of thing going with Kieran. So I wonder if, you know, at first she was interested in Arthur, but then kind of Kieran's kindness and gentleness, like his really gentle, sweet, kind nature, like maybe she found that really attractive. Mary-Beth herself seemed very kind and sweet and compassionate. I imagine she probably hated how the gang treated Kieran from the start. As far as most people were concerned, he was no Driscoll, he was the enemy. You know, he'd happily kill them given the opportunity. But I wonder if Mary-Beth, yeah, like disliked that he was tied up and starved and bullied and harassed and stuff. I can see her opposing it because she just got a big heart, and she was the one who defended Kieran the most the whole way through. I don't know if that was because she liked him or just because that's genuinely how she felt. But she was the one who was always like, he's not an O'Driscoll and stop calling him that and stuff. She was the first person to notice that he went missing. She was really worried about him as well. Right near the start, I heard Kieran called her pretty, which was adorable. I didn't hear much else going on between them, so I don't know if it's canon that they were a couple or if it's, you know, if people have like genuinely seen some of the camp conversations that I haven't. That's very likely. Or perhaps it's assumed from things like that kind of hint towards the fact that they were interested in each other. She didn't seem too torn up after he died. There was, like, immediately after he died, she did say, you know, she was really upset about it. But it wasn't like, once we moved to Beaver Hollow and stuff, she kind of seemed obviously upset about the situation in general, but there was no more talk of Kieran, really. I don't know if she'd moved on or just didn't know what else there was to say about it, or maybe just the situation of the gang was a more pressing matter. So she had to put her grief to one side, perhaps. But I don't know how serious they were, or how, like, in love she was, if she was in love. She did do some outlaw work, but it was almost like she was kind of like Tilly, I suppose. She was very much a civilian living in a gang of outlaws. And she did do the bit, like, you know, she pretended to... I can't remember what she did. Did she pretend to be hurt or in need of help to stop that wagon? I don't think she was with the gang to sort of fight for change or to live life by the gun or anything like that. I think she just wanted that life of adventure and the unknown and, yeah, creating their own narrative kind of thing. I think Mary-Beth stayed as long as she dared to when things started to get really ugly with Beaver Hollow and Chapter 6. I think she wanted to stay because she wanted to stay for the people she was close to and cared a lot for. People like Arthur, like the other girls. Don't think she cared for Mrs. Grimshaw. But also, as I said, she wasn't a fighter, and I think when she saw that, I think she came to realise that whether she stayed or went, things were never going to go back to the way that they were. I don't know if this is edible. Hey! 4 of 4. I just saw it was a berry and I knew I had that challenge. Craft 7 items using sage as an ingredient. Alright. But I think it came to a point where she realised there was nothing really to stay for. The life that they had was gone. There was no going back. People were just sort of leaving one by one, and I think she saw that everyone would eventually go, and she might as well get out while she could. It was so lovely though to see her outside the train station was amazing. Because we never got to say goodbye to her, and she was one of the characters I was the most fond of, it was really sad that she kind of just left while we weren't around during the night or whenever it happened. So it was lovely to see her and kind of have that closure. Don't. Leave me alone. Oh, you've lost one of your antlers. It was really good to see her, that she's become a writer as well. She's, you know, she's doing what she loves. She's still living quite a free life. You know, she's not working in a shop or doing set hours for somebody else. She's still got the freedom of managing her own schedule. But she's also working with what she loves. She's working with books now. So rather than procrastinating by reading books and neglecting her work, books are her work. So she gets to read books, and that is part of her doing her job. And then writing her own stories. And I do imagine that the times we had together probably have a great influence on her stories. Maybe not in obvious ways, it depends on what sort of genre she writes, but I do wonder if there's going to be some characters she writes that kind of take on the personalities of the people in the gang. Maybe Dutch would be like the baddie, and maybe she'd put like Arthur or somebody as like one of the main protagonists, or someone like Kieran. I don't know if there's ever the opportunity to find one of her books or read it. She did give her name, although I can't remember it. It was an alias she gave of like her author name. So yeah, it'd be cool to see if you can find one of her books out there in the world and read it. I did, when I recorded this episode a few days ago, the one that didn't unfortunately record, I did find a book that was quite fun. Oh, True Tales of Frank Heck, that was it. I don't think this is one of hers, but it did make me laugh. She grabbed his hair and yanked his head back, placing the revolver under his chin as she placed her lips on his, knowing full well that she loved him, as a woman can only truly love a man who kills for a living and does not fear death like some wimp in a town, but embraces it like a tough man in the wilderness. And it just made me think of like when she was sort of reading all these love stories and stuff. I wonder if this is the kind of thing she read. Like maybe this is where she got her like her inspiration to join like a group of outlaws because of reading stories like Frank Heck. It did make me laugh though. It's a shame you didn't get to see my original reaction, but it was kind of funny. Yeah, I think Arthur would be really happy to see Mary-Beth like that now. For my next character, who made 7th place, I'd first like to give a big shout out to Charlie, whose comments about this character were cracking me up so much. I think it started off, it was maybe only supposed to be the one comment. Charlie was not a fan of this character. And then almost every episode afterwards there was a new comment that was like, and another thing I hate about her, and another thing. And I was just, I was laughing so much reading them, it brightened my day. It's, of course, Sadie Adler. She really did seem to be a love or hate character from what I've seen. I really liked her, but I do definitely agree with some of the points Charlie made. But it was just so funny how passionate Charlie was. So thank you, Charlie, for the comments. They were very, very entertaining. Sadie was one of the characters I found that had the most character development. Obviously, when she did first join the gang, she was... well, she'd just been attacked and abused and had her husband killed by the O'Driscolls. So understandably, she always had a very strong vendetta against the O'Driscolls. But when we first found her, she didn't really have that anger and that hate so much. She was just kind of quite broken and depressed. She'd obviously just lost her husband, her home. But obviously she'd just been through a lot, so she was still recovering from it, processing it all, adjusting to this new life with these new people. Although I think she had a lot of character development, one thing I do think would have been better is if it was a bit of a smoother transition into her crushed, depressed and broken state at the start to her feisty, fighting, fiery sort of state. She kind of, the whole way through Horseshoe Overlook, she was really miserable and down and saying like, oh, it's like a nightmare I can't wake up from, and seemed really sad. And then pretty much the moment we got to Clemens Point, she suddenly seemed like, I don't want to cut vegetables, I want to fight and stuff. Maybe it was just sort of an overnight change. That can happen, but it just seemed very abrupt. I think it would have felt a bit more immersive if it had been like a smoother transition. If maybe for like the first half of Horseshoe Overlook she'd been like, why am I even here, like I don't want to live through this nightmare and stuff. And then maybe the second half of Horseshoe Overlook she was like, I'm thinking maybe I'll stay sort of thing. You know, like kind of some middle ground between how she was before and how she ended up. I think that would have felt a bit smoother. Anyway, we got to Clemens Point and she was assigned official vegetable cutter and assistant to our head chef Pearson, which she loved. She loved that role. Though, I did actually find that really interesting. It was kind of a bit of an eye-opener, kind of how gender norms were back then and the restrictions by gender. I mean, even Arthur, the main character, who generally was a lot more open-minded and sort of live and let live, even he had a couple of like jabs at her for being a woman and wanting to like be one of the fighters and stuff. I think he was like, he called her princess or something at one point. Have we got some dinosaur bones? I think we've got some dinosaur bones. I was like stood right on them. Yes. Look at that giant foot or hand or something. Yee, got 8 out of 30. We've got so many.
There's my girl.
Why can I never find them? If there's that many out there. Yeah, I really admired her for standing up for herself so much and trying so hard to, even with all that resistance she had, still pushing really hard for the role she deserved in the gang, because she was good at it. It definitely really suited her, and gender shouldn't have come into it. So I really admired her for pushing back and yeah, not giving in and trying to stand up for herself. I thought that was really cool. But we did see very shortly after the reckless side of Sadie Adler. This is the bit I definitely agree with Charlie about. Definitely. And I would say, like I've said before, every character, even like the better ones, are flawed. I would say this is definitely Sadie's flaw. She mostly did this with the O'Driscolls, which obviously, given her history, kind of makes sense. But it wasn't just the O'Driscolls. I think the first bunch she did it with, on the way back from the general store, was the Lemoyne Raiders, I think. So, you know, she didn't have a grudge against them in particular, other than the fact that they were shooting at us. I feel like at that moment with the Lemoyne Raiders, it was possibly because she wanted to prove herself. You know, she'd just been told that she was a woman, you know, she should know her place, she should take up a woman's role rather than trying to pick up a gun and fight with men. So I can understand her frustration with that, and I wonder if maybe this was like, we were taking fire, she got hold of a gun and had the opportunity to show Arthur that she could fight, so maybe that was why she kind of became so reckless and violent in that moment. But that was the only time I recall, I think, where it wasn't the O'Driscolls that she kind of acted very recklessly with. There was the time when Colm O'Driscoll was getting hung, and we had to go to make sure that he didn't escape, that he did actually serve his sentence. And we went there with massive risk. We were very wanted ourselves, and we literally went into the one city on this map, the one place with the most lawmen. If we got caught, it was highly unlikely we were going to make it out alive. And all we needed to do was lay low and maybe do some sneaky things behind the scenes just to make sure that Colm didn't get rescued and everything went to plan. And we did that, and everything was going to plan, and we didn't need to do anything else other than keep a low profile. And Colm was going to get hung no matter what. But then what does Sadie do? She causes a scene. And it would be fine if she was only putting herself at risk, but she was putting Arthur and Dutch at risk as well. So it was really reckless to endanger them. From what I recall, it wasn't an easy escape, and they were lucky to get out of there alive. Obviously, Sadie was hell-bent on taking out every last O'Driscoll. They were, as far as she was concerned, they were all part of the problem. They were all part of Jake's death, of her abuse, of her home being attacked and raided and burnt down. One O'Driscoll was as bad as the rest, and maybe she was also trying to save anyone else suffering the same fate. But we could have gone after them after Colm had hung, with a plan, with when we were in a better position, you know, to survive. But she just kind of lost control sometimes and lost her temper, and she would just act out of impulse, putting herself and sometimes the others in danger. She did it as well when the O'Driscolls again, they attacked Kieran, and then they raided us at Shady Bell. And it was herself she was putting at risk, not the others, but Arthur stayed out had to run out to get her, and then he was staying out with her because she refused to come back into the house where it was sort of fortified and they had a more defensible position. So again, she was, in her rage and her bloodlust, she was putting Arthur at risk and herself, which I'd say is Sadie's flaw. She's too impulsive, too uncontrolled when she sees red and gets into those situations. I don't think she trusted or maybe even particularly liked anyone in the gang to begin with. I do wonder if she kind of thought, you know, she was sort of out of the frying pan into the fire. You know, she'd been attacked and assaulted by one band of outlaws and then rescued by another, but she probably thought, You know, what's the difference? Until she sort of got to know us better. But I do think gradually she got to know and trust Arthur, and then I think she became loyal to him because he kind of proved he was worthy of her trust and of that respect. You know, he always had her back and looked out for her. And I know he did tease and jab at her to begin with. Once she proved that she could handle herself, he was quite happy to hand her a gun and fight alongside her and stuff, which I think she really appreciated him sort of giving her the chance to prove herself and have a place among the rest of the gunners. I think for her, trust is earned. I don't think she cared that Dutch was the leader or that other people looked up to him or that he called the shots. To her, that doesn't demand trust or respect. But Arthur genuinely earned it, which I think is why she stuck with Arthur. I'm actually quite surprised at the very end that she went with Abigail rather than staying with Arthur. Knowing Sadie, I would have expected her to really fight Arthur about going and to sort of stay and fight with him. But the only thing I can think of is maybe because she knew that Arthur was going to die anyway. I don't think she would have cared about the odds at all. I don't think she's ever cared about the odds of survival. But it might also be because she knew that if anything happened to Abigail on the road, you know, Abigail had her moments where she could handle herself, but she wasn't really much of a fighter, and Sadie probably knew that she needed to get Abigail to Jack because Jack was waiting for her, and she probably didn't want to be the reason why Jack's mum never got to her if something had happened on the road. So it was probably, she probably did want to go with Arthur, but maybe also knew that logically it made more sense to go with Abigail and keep her safe. There were some pretty badass characters, but you know, how she acted, her skill, her behavior, her like how she dressed, it was so cool, so badass. I would be terrified of her if I ever met her in real life. Like when we kind of got that intro in the Valentine saloon and she just full on stabbed a guy in the hand. I was kind of happy for her and, you know, proud that she was a bounty hunter. You know, she'd made a place for herself in the world. But then when she kind of got talking about it to John,
slow now.
It seemed very lonely. And, you know, she said about how she does this work and earns money and then buys herself more clothes and then sort of rinse and repeat. But it just kind of felt like, you know, she lived to work and worked to live, and that was all life was to her now. Like she'd sort of lost her purpose. She wasn't living for anyone anymore. I think, you know, she used to live for her husband Jake, and then when she was in the gang she sort of had Arthur as a companion to stand alongside, and then after the gang fell apart and Arthur died, it's like she was kind of left with nothing really. She was sort of filling her time with mercenary work, filling up her wardrobe, buying a new horse now and again, but that was kind of it. And yeah, it just felt a bit empty. So when she said that, I kind of felt a bit sad for her. But then at the very end, I was really happy after the wedding, and after we killed Micah, that she kind of was moving on. I mean, maybe that's why she'd hung around all that time. Maybe that was her purpose. She was the one who started listening out for news about Micah and trying to find him. All of the information came from her. So maybe she didn't have anyone to live for in a positive sense, but she was living on, and her goal was to find and kill Micah. Either way, once that was done, she seemed ready to move on with her life and yeah, move forward. She left to lands afar, and who knows, maybe she'd find new love, maybe she'd find a new role in life, maybe she'd find new purpose. But the fact that she was moving to something fresh and new kind of gave me hope that, yeah, she'd re-find something to live for.
You sure do put in a shift.
Never been one to be a good for nothing.
Good for you.
So long.
Oh, it's so nice. Like, I helped them build that house, or I helped protect them so they could build that house. Look at them growing crops. Good for them. Well, that's been there a long time.
Easy there.
Do you remember the very first murder bridge? Gosh, that takes me back. And it took me so long to figure it out because I just didn't go up that little hill and find the head. Oh, so young, so naive. The last gang member I'm going to talk about today will be Javier. Javier Escuela. I know this is going to be a controversial choice for 6th place on my favourites list. He beat John Marston, he beat Sadie, he beat Dutch, he beat Uncle, he beat a lot of characters that would probably be in like the top 3 or 4 for most people. I just really like him. I think he's really cool. I realised while I was talking about him last time in the episode that didn't record, as I was talking, I realised how much he reminds me of Cassian from Rogue One. I think because he's Mexican and because he's like a resistance fighter, you know, he's trying to fight against the system and against like oppression of the common people and the sort of people of status and power suppressing the poor and exploiting them and stuff. That was very much, you know, the rebels in Star Wars fighting against the Empire, and it reminds me a lot about Javier and in his sort of role. I know his life in Mexico sounded, yeah, really awful from the stories he told and stuff. Way more awful than things are here in Red Dead's version of America. But it did sound very much like, you know, he was a part of a group of rebels or something, I guess. Like, he was fighting against the authorities in Mexico or the corruption in Mexico. He got himself into a lot of trouble, was very, very, very wanted. And so he fled across the border into America, and it sounds like, although our situation is a bit different, it sounded like Dutch's group kind of fit the bill for like what he had been doing in Mexico. We had a similar kind of view on society and sort of the modern system of law and order, and how we didn't want a place in it and we wanted to live our lives our own way by our own code, free from kind of handing over the control to the government or, you know, those kinds of people. So I think that's why he probably fell into Dutch's gang. It was kind of like meets like, you know. But he definitely did give me Cassian vibes. Now, I am very fond of Cassian from Rogue One. Rogue One itself is one of my favourite films. And I did wonder if maybe there might be a bit of subconscious bias going on there. Like, maybe that might be partly why I really like Javier, because I automatically have this really good association there, because he reminds me of Cassian. I think he's really cool. He's really talented. He's a very skilled shooter, very skilled tracker. He's very loyal. He's brave. You know, he doesn't care about the danger we're up against, because as far as he's concerned, he's doing what he feels is right and what he believes in. And yeah, he's just following that vision of fighting for a better world and a freer world and a fairer world. So yeah, I really, really respected that. I thought it was really sweet. I know at the end he did side with Dutch. I don't think he ever wanted to go against Arthur. I think he was probably quite upset that Arthur chose to go against Dutch, because I don't think he ever wanted to fight Arthur. I think even at the very end he was probably very unhappy that he was stood opposing Arthur, of all people. I think he wanted Arthur to be on their side and, you know, fighting with them. But I think he was very loyal. I think he believed in the cause, you know, he believed in Dutch's vision. they'd been in pickles before and Dutch had found them a way out, and, you know, maybe that was a bit naive of him, but he possibly thought, you know, yeah, the situation is ugly, but if people just, you know, stand by Dutch, if people just hold fast and believe in him, he'll get us out of this. He's always got us out of these situations, but, you know, we need to have faith in him, we need to stand by him. At the very end, I think he probably thought, you know, Arthur made his choice. Arthur chose to stand against Dutch. So although he didn't want to fight Arthur, his loyalty was more to Dutch than to Arthur. And as far as he was concerned, you know, it was Arthur's choice to go against Dutch, more than, you know, his choice to go against Arthur or Dutch's choice to go against Arthur. I think he saw it as Arthur was the one who'd kind of made this us versus them situation. So yeah, I think to him it was loyalty to the vision and the cause and, you know, this way of life they were fighting for. That took utmost priority. And he didn't want to do a lot of the stuff that they did. He definitely didn't want to fight against his own people. But I think as far as he was concerned,
Easy.
things like that were a means to an end. And sometimes you had to do the ugly work and you had to get your hands dirty, you know, to make that better world. Not unlike Cassian from Rogue One. He's definitely his own character. He isn't Cassian. There's definitely a lot to Javier that is not like Cassian from Rogue One, but I really just feel an association there. That's just me though, that's just me in my brain. I'm not saying that either one of them was based on the other or influenced by the other or anything. They are their own entirely separate people. I also noticed when I replayed the ending to go for the alternative ending, I didn't pick it up the first time, but when
Easy now.
Javier runs into the camp a bit late, you know, after Mike has shot Mrs. Grimshaw, and I think he runs in as, you know, it's side versus side, and that's when he says that, you know, the Pinkertons are on their way, and he does side with Dutch, and, you know, Bill and Micah and that have their guns aimed at Arthur and John, and Javier definitely takes their side, and you see him kind of move his hand with his gun, but he never actually points his gun at Arthur. You kind of see him raise his gun and like start to lower it, but you don't know if he was actually gonna point at Arthur, or if he was like hesitant, or he was still figuring it out, or if he was gonna try and like, he was siding with Dutch but also wasn't gonna shoot at Arthur. Basically they got interrupted by the Pinkertons before we ever found out what would have happened there, but it was interesting, I thought. He definitely seemed to be showing some reluctance there. Which kind of enforces how I feel, you know, he was in that moment. You know, he was standing by Dutch no matter what, but I don't think he actually wanted to fight Arthur. Or, you know, I think he did genuinely like Arthur. Hello, Spice. Nice of you to drop in. How's your evening going? They always nag me when it's time for bed, or if I've been up too late. Because we all go to bed together. It's really cute. I go to bed and Yuki's on the bed and the cats are on the bed and we all go to bed together. So, you know, they've got access to the bedroom. They can go to bed whenever they want. But if I'm not there, you know, bedtime is a group activity. And if I'm not there, I'm ruining bedtime. So they come and, yeah, harass me if I'm taking too long. But obviously, this is a longer episode. We never got to see what happened after Dutch left and Arthur died. Because obviously then it just sort of jumped ahead to the epilogue. But I do wonder, because I think Javier stuck with Dutch because he thought that Dutch would make it work somehow. You know, no matter how bad things got, he believed in Dutch, and he thought that, you know, kind of like I said with Dutch, if he believed enough and just had faith, that everything would work out. He just needed to keep that faith. And at the very end, it seemed like Dutch just gave up. You know, he walked away from Micah, he walked away from Arthur, and it was at that moment he seemed to just be done with it all. And because of how loyally and fiercely Javier had stood by Dutch. You know, he watched the whole gang fall apart. He watched people turn their back on Dutch, saying that, you know, Dutch wasn't going to make this right, that this couldn't be made right at this point, and Javier so loyally kept that faith in Dutch. And so I wonder what his reaction would have been when Dutch just left it all, just gave up and walked away and disappeared. I do wonder if Javier would have been like angry at Dutch, or if he would have blamed everybody else for you know, maybe he thought that if everyone had just stayed and believed in Dutch, then Dutch could have made things right, but it was because everyone turned their back on him. Javier said in camp that he could never return to Mexico because he was so wanted there, he'd just be shot on sight, you know. He almost made it sound like there was no chance of him even getting back to Mexico alive. So it was a real surprise to find out that he is now in Mexico. The last place I probably expect him to be. I thought he'd either hang around here, or if here was too hot because of the, you know, still being really wanted and the lawmen and the Pinkertons after him, then maybe he'd go further north. Oh gosh. Yeah, I was really surprised to find out he's gone to Mexico. I mean, it sounds like he survived. He clearly wasn't shot on sight. But yeah, I don't know if he's in hiding or if he's with a gang there. I can't remember if I was told. So yeah, that's all the characters I'm going to go through today. But as always, let me know your thoughts on the characters I've mentioned. You know, if I've said anything you particularly agree with or disagree with or you feel differently about, I would love to hear all of your views. I know I can't reply to all the comments, but I have been reading every single one of them. If you get a like thing from me, then I've read it, and I do read them thoroughly. I sit there to myself when I want a bit of a pick-me-up. I'll go through my comments and yeah, read them and be like, oh, that's interesting, or oh, really good point, I hadn't thought about that, and yeah, just literally talk to myself. But yeah, I find it so fun to hear all of your thoughts on it as well, and views, and any questions you'd like me to answer. I'll read out the things that I'm still going to cover, but if you want to know anything, any opinion I have, or any favourite or least favourite anything that I have that's not on this list, then yeah, please do post it in the comments and I'll try and yeah, answer it in one of my videos. So I still need to tell you my favourite town or city, my favourite minor location, so a smaller location than a town or city, but still somewhere noteworthy. My favourite campsite, my favourite view. So some of those I was waiting until I'd done New Austin because I didn't want to pick a favourite town or a favourite view and then go to New Austin and then find something I liked more. So now I've been there, I can get to addressing those once I'm done with the gang members. What I'll probably leave until the last episode or the last couple of episodes will be the final points, which are my thoughts on the game just as a game. So not including the story, but sort of the mechanics of it, how it plays, yeah, like the graphics, the interface, stuff like that. My thoughts on the story itself, because that needs its own category for sure. And what I'm going to take away from the game after having played it, like how I feel it's impacted or enriched my life in general. So those will probably wait till the end because they're quite good. They're quite good points to finish on, I think. But yeah, so those are what I've got left to cover. But by all means, if there's any other questions or anything you'd like to anything you'd like me to talk about, please do post it in the comments. Hey Rufus!
All right, Rufus.
Hey boys!
You all right, Jack?
Morning, sir.
How you like it? That's good. We'll be happy here.
Thank you, sir.
Jack never seems to answer the second bit of dialogue, does he? And I'm going to end this episode there. I finally did it. I finally made it to the end. I know we still had our technical difficulties. Yeah, apologies, and hopefully it's okay. Hopefully it's not too long, but at least you have seen some actual gameplay before and after. There wasn't too much really in the last part of this while I was talking. I was kind of riding around New Hanover, but I guess I've already covered a lot of New Hanover, so I found one lot of dinosaur bones, which is cool, but there wasn't really too much else going on. I can't believe how much it's taken to get this one episode done. Yeah, we did find some more dinosaur bones since then. We didn't solve the statue puzzle, but we did complete it. I'm sorry for anyone who wanted to watch me try and figure that out. There is no way I would have figured that out. You would have just had to sit there watching me for 20 minutes, just pushing random buttons. Maybe I would have got it, probably not. It was really cool though, really cool puzzle. But yeah, how anybody got that without being told how to do it, I can't even comprehend your IQ. Like, I cannot understand how anyone could just do that. It was cool to go back and talk to the devil guy. It says philosopher though. So he is a devil, a philosopher, and a cave hermit. It sounds like the start to a bad joke, doesn't it? So next time, hopefully it goes a lot smoother. Really, it can't go much less smooth than this one has, but we are into the last episode of me reviewing the characters next time. It's going to be my top 5. So we're going to have Charles Smith, Hosea Matthews, then Arthur Morgan, then Kieran Duffy, and then Sean Maguire. So for those like top 5, which I know are a lot of people's favourites, then yeah, catch next episode because we're going to delve into that one. And then we're done reviewing the characters, and then it will probably just be, yeah, probably just a couple more episodes after that. I don't see us doing too much more. I am going to start looking at some guides, I think, to try. I really want to get all the rock carvings, even if I have to use a guide to do it. And there's still a couple of things I want to do, like finding Bigfoot, the Sandony vampire, that swamp in the cabin in the swamp. A few of you guys have mentioned it, and you've got me intrigued. So I do want to go and check that out. So yeah, a bit more exploring, but we are getting into, I'd say, the final episodes of my final episodes. Thank you for watching. Thank you for bearing with the technical issues. And have a fantastic week, and I'll see you again next Sunday for our top 5 characters and my thoughts on them and their role within the story. I look forward to it. Take care, Outlaws, and I'll see you next Sunday. Bye-bye! Wait, why is that not... Oh no, it's frozen! Oh no! Why is this session so cursed? I'm still recording, but you can't see it. Jenga. I found Eagle Flies' grave, and I literally said I'm so glad you guys are here for this moment. But I'm still stood in the devil's cave. Jenga. Why did it freeze there? I didn't do anything. I didn't stop recording. I cannot believe this. I cannot believe this.